Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh, yeah. Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska. This is your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello, my friends. Hello. It was Monday. I just got a call from down in Homer, and they're like, are you going to connect to the radio stations or what? I'm like, oh, yeah, that was a thing. I was supposed to do that like an hour ago. Man, was I? Wow. Welcome to Monday. It's just how it is around here. Oh, man. All right. Well, now that we've got it all together, so to speak, shall we get into it and start dealing with our day today? We got some stuff to do. We got some stuff to do, people to talk to. Starting off here this morning with in hour one, Sarah Montalbano will be joining us from Montalbano Mondays over there on Substack. She's going to be joining us here to talk about Ambler Road, maybe a little education, maybe a little this, a little that. Whatever we feel like talking about. We just enjoy talking with Sarah, so we'll figure that out. Also, then in hour two, we're going to be joined by Ben Carpenter. That's who it is. Ben Carpenter, representative running for senator. We'll see what he has to say about all the stuff that's going on down there in the legislature, and it's a bunch of stuff. I'll tell you that for nothing. We'll get into that here this morning as we get going on. All right, so happy Monday. Let's. The only thing that could make a Monday better is Montalbano Mondays. It was a thing here on the program, and then it became a thing out on Substack. Let's jump on over here to the green room and pull her on board and see what she has to say this morning. Sarah Montalbano joins us right now. Hello, how are you doing this morning, Sarah? How's is it Monday for you too?
It is Monday for me, and it's a doozy of a Monday so far, but this is going to be the best part of it, I think.
This is the best. If this is the best part of the day, I'm going back to bed. No, it's just, one of those things. All right, Sarah. Well, we got some stuff to talk about today. First and foremost, I know you've been working hard on, kind of analysis of some of the things and resource development. And specifically, you've been talking a lot about the Ambler Road. You've been writing about that. So, first and foremost, let's just get that out of. We'll get your stuff out of the way before we get to my stuff, right? Let's get to that and start talking about what's going on with the Ambler Road project and Alaska resource development and everything else. Let's get started right there.
Sure thing. Yeah, I think Suzanne did a really good job of reporting on this when it was happening, but June 28th is when the Bureau of Land Management passed down their final decision against the Ambler Road, denying construction permits and all of these things that it needs from the federal government in order to proceed forward. So I knocked out an op-ed that day, pitched it to the Wall Street Journal, and it finally got into the paper on July 13th, and you can find it at The Contradictions of Biden Climate Policy and Profile. And you may recall that something very eventful happened on July 13th, and that was President Trump's attempted assassination. So that was a big day, and I'm glad it got into the paper when it did, because I think the news cycle might have been a little too busy after that. So I was really happy to be able to highlight a national level issue, which is the dearth of critical minerals that we would need to do this clean energy transition. But really highlighting how Ambler is a microcosm of that. We're seeing this administration denying all of these projects, but they still need the minerals. So where are they going to get them? Overseas.
Right. So walk us through this for those of us who have not been following this, this whole debacle over the Ambler Road project. Walk us through it from start to finish. What does it require? What were we supposed to get? What have we been denied? What is it? Just give us the A to Z kind of rundown here on this.
Yeah, it's been a long road for the Ambler Road. It was guaranteed to Alaska under the 1980 Alaska National Interest Lands Conservation Act. So that has been a long time coming. It very clearly states that the Secretary shall permit, referring to the Secretary of the Interior. So there's some interesting legal stuff that's going on with the Biden administration's decision on this one. But that was, 2015, 2016, the state of Alaska started really putting in plans in earnest and applying for these things to get the permitting done. I believe there was, it was permitted by the Trump administration. And then the Biden administration, when it came in, their Department of the Interior said, hold up, we're going to voluntarily redo this. And they found, far more harms, far more things that they hadn't considered before. And so now that's leading to the no decision there. So interesting legal stuff going on. I'd love to dive in more in detail, but the broad strokes, it's 211 miles through the Northwest Arctic Borough to the Ambler Mining District, and that would unlock really significant quantities of zinc, lead, silver, cobalt, copper, and cobalt and copper are really, really essential for electric vehicles, solar panels, battery storage, all of those things that we're really trying to do right now as a nation. And so we're simultaneously denying access to these things and trying to find them. So that was what got me really there. And the potential mines in the area, that's going to be, more than 5,000 jobs,
Right.
road construction, all of these things together.
Right. Well, and what's interesting to me, and you've highlighted it here, is that we're looking at a lot of these minerals that are critical infrastructure minerals, for, batteries and everything else, probably even some national security ramifications, I'm assuming, for some of these minerals for making various things. And yet at the same time, they're saying, oh, no, we couldn't do those here because they might cause critical harms to the environment. And so we'll go to China to buy some of these things, or some other nation where they have no environmental constraints on how they mine or how they do things or anything else. That is, that's really the fascinating conundrum here, is that we wouldn't do it here, but we will farm that out to somebody else who will pollute the environment. And that's okay, I guess, because it's not in our backyard. Is that kind of the idea here?
Yeah, we don't have to see it, so we're not worried about it. That is the whole idea of offshoring the environmental impacts. And I really do believe, our mining industry, our oil and gas, all of these are, state of the art. We know how to protect our environment, and we do so very, very well. We take a lot of pride in it. So when the administration makes a value judgment like that and says, we would do this so poorly that we would prefer to have it done somewhere else where we don't have to think about it. That is really surprising to me, that we wouldn't want that under our purview. The other thing is a lot of human rights abuses and things like that. I don't know if you've read the book Cobalt Red, but that is a really powerful expose of the Democratic Republic of the Congo and how all these artisanal miners are mining for cobalt with shovels, and children are doing this. So we really need to think carefully about where we're getting these things and if we're doing it responsibly. And I think we could do it no better than in Alaska.
Yeah, I mean, Alaska's got a pretty good track record when it comes to this kind of stuff, and we know what it takes, and we've got we've got the experience and the expertise and if we have the road, then we have the ability to pull all this stuff out. Yeah, I mean, when you look at cobalt mining specifically, cobalt mining, and I haven't read the book, but I have seen a couple brief documentaries about the whole mining industry in the Congo, and it's pretty shocking what's going on. I mean, spend 10 minutes on YouTube and go out there and take a look at the Congo cobalt industry and take a look at what that's like, and then tell us how it would be better if we continued to farm it out to them versus here in Alaska where it has some kind of oversight and everything else. I do want to get into the legal ramifications of this too, but I guess we'll do that in the next segment. But again, the justification, like you said, it was already permitted, and then they said, "Well, wait a second, we're gonna do even better than that. We're gonna go." I mean, nobody ever said, "Oh, great, here they come. They're gonna do better." Nobody ever said that was a good thing. So, I guess what were the justifications to say we couldn't possibly do it here? It'd be better if a 12-year-old from the Congo was digging this stuff up with a piece of stick, rather than having us do it here.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. July 2020, Trump administration gave a 50-year, right of way. They said, "Great, this checks out." The Alaska Industrial Development and Export Authority's proposed route only crosses about 24 miles of Bureau of Land Management land, and the rest is all kind of Interior Department lands. So the Bureau is basically saying in these decisions, well, the 1980 law, that just says the Secretary of the Interior. Like, that's not saying it's Bureau of Land Management land. It's just Interior Department lands. So that's really kind of the crux of the argument, and I don't think that's going to hold up if this comes to a legal challenge, which I'm sure it will. But that is kind of the reasoning there. It's really astonishing because one of the things the Interior Department said in its press release, this quote just amazes me. It says, "There are no active mines in the area and no mine plan proposals pending before the federal government." Yeah, no kidding. It's kind of hard to plan for a mine unless there's a road out there. So I
Well,
was I was blown away by that.
this is a chicken and an egg thing. Well,
Yes.
we haven't leased any office space on this skyscraper that we haven't built or even have plans yet because we don't have permits to break ground yet. You haven't shown us a lease for the penthouse of this skyscraper. What? I mean, are you kidding me? Seriously, that's insane. But that this is how the mental gymnastics that they have to go through to kind of justify some of this stuff is nuttier than squirrel poo. I mean, it really is, when it comes down to it. Brian says, "Don't worry, we'll send a strongly worded email to the Congo and demand that they do better." That's, maybe that'll work. Maybe that will help out there. I'm not sure. All right, Sarah Montalbano is our guest. We're going to continue with her here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. We're going to continue this discussion on Ambler Road, including some of the discussions with some of the stakeholders in the area, I guess. I remember there were some discussions on that as well. We'll get some details from Sarah on that. The Michael Duke Show continues. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Back with more. Sarah Montalbano, who you can find at sarahmontalbano.substack.com. Going to get her the Montalbano Monday moniker on .com, thebomb.com. Back with more of the Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
What is that?
Common sense. Regularly heard on American radio. Michael Duke Show. Radio.
Okay. All right. Sarah, do me a favor. Grab the top of your laptop and pull it down just a little bit.
All right.
Because your head is all like, there we go. Well, almost. I'm losing your chin. It's like there.
The webcam bobbles a little bit.
It bobbles.
It
There
bobbles. How's
That's a
that?
little better because I
Okay.
felt like, especially when we were side by side, I was like, "She's itty bitty tiny. What's going on?"
Pull it
But
forward a little bit
it's
too.
yeah. There you go. There we go. All right. That is astonishing. Well, we have no record of any mine that's going to be planned in an area that has no roads, and we must helicopter and blimp everything in. So it's amazing. Um,
It drove me nuts when I saw that. I knew the Wall Street Journal toned down my original sentence pretty hard because I was just enraged by that. It was like that's shocking. Uh,
yeah, yeah. No, I mean, just like I don't get it. Of course, there's nobody planning on. What's the old Field of Dreams? If you build it, they will come. If there was a road, well, yeah, then there might be some there might be some plans to do something out there. But you know, yeah,
it's kind of hard
it's
without a
kind
road.
it's kind of hard when you don't have. It's amazing what happens when you have no infrastructure whatsoever. You can't do anything. That's amazing. Um, so I really want to get into the legal aspects of this because the ANILCA component and the fact that some bureaucrat said, well, it said that the Secretary of the Interior, but we're the BLM. So we run under
Oh,
operation.
but you're under the Interior Department's umbrella.
I'm just
That's
Aren't they your boss? When the director of the Department of the Interior says something, aren't you supposed to go how high? I mean, come on, that's the yeah, it's a pretty amazing thing. What kind of feedback have you gotten so far over this, Sarah? Have you seen anybody reached out to you and said, "Let's talk more," or what?
It's been actually pretty interesting because there was kind of a dead time when, all of this Trump assassination stuff was going down, just no one was
Right,
thinking about it.
right.
And now I've gotten a couple, inquiries of like, what's this? Have you been talking to anybody at Ambler? And truthfully, no. This is just kind of my thoughts on the subject, but it's been really interesting. And of course, there's always people who say, "Well, who are you to tell Alaskans what to do?" And I'm like, I'm an Alaskan. Come on.
I'm
Uh,
gonna ask you, who are you to tell her I live here? I'm just not.
exactly. I obviously have no stake in it whatsoever. Yeah, you're
Right,
right.
exactly.
Random
No.
Twitter user.
It's
Um,
yeah, some random Twitter user from Connecticut, um, you know, or whatever.
it's always like that. It's yeah.
Yeah,
It's a lot of fun.
yeah. No, living life in the socials. My wife said something to me it was like Friday or maybe it was Saturday, I don't know. And I'm just like she was talking about how somebody took something harshly on the internet and I looked at her and said, "It's the internet. It's cancer. You don't put stuff out on the internet." I mean, I've seen people put out the most innocuous, polite question on the internet and then get absolutely shredded and perforated for how dare you. And it was just like, okay, this is why we can't have nice things because you feel entitled behind you keyboard warrior. You feel entitled behind your keyboard to do whatever. The anonymity of, I mean, if you said that to somebody's face, you'd be punched right in the mouth. But, on your keyboard, you could do anything you want. So
Exactly.
makes it interesting for sure. All right. Well, we're going to get into the legalities of it and talk a little bit about the backstory. And then where do we go from here? That'll be the kind of the next part here. Sarah Montalbano is our guest. I do this whole thing though of the oh well, it's got to happen because they said they signed it and now it's not. And what does that mean? What are the legal ramifications? Sarah Montalbano, our guest, the Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty based, free thinking radio. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell. Don't forget Ben Carpenter's coming up in hour 2, and that should be fun. All right, here we go. 5 seconds. 4, 3. Now it's 4, 3, 2. I can count. Here we go.
Public enema number 1. Oh, wait, sorry. Enemy. Public enemy number 1, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
I am the perfect angel, not a pain in the anything. Ask Sarah. I'm just perfect. Sarah Montalbano, our guest, sarahmontalbano.substack.com, Montalbano, Montalbano. She joins us this morning to talk about the Ambler Road project. Now, I was, I followed this vaguely, right? I mean, this is not something that I've been focused on doing a lot of things, but I've seen some of the hubbub over this kind of thing. I didn't realize, one, that it was mandated by ANILCA. I think that's an interesting point that we need to talk about. And I know that there's been some other challenges. I know NANA, there's been some questions about whether or not they supported this, because this crosses a cup. It's not very much. It's a few miles, right?
Mhm.
Of native allotment land and some other things. And so I know there's a lot of contention and questions in here and everything else. So now that you've walked us through the basics, let's talk about the legalities, the legal aspects of it, and then some of the challenges that there's been so far.
Absolutely. Good morning to all of you in the chat. Wishing me a good morning. By the way, it's pretty good. This one's a really interesting case because Nana actually has pulled out, so they are not going to be renewing their leases for those couple miles that would cross Nana lands. So unfortunately, I believe the Ambler Road is pretty much dead unless that can be changed. And one of the things that they talked about that I actually cite in my article here, um, the Bureau of Land Management floated an idea in their final environmental impact statement that, after the useful commercial life of Ambler Road, it might become public. And that is contrary to the wishes of NANA and pretty much every other stakeholder that I believe was vocal on this issue, that they said, well, the environmental impacts are going to multiply if you open this up to the public, and then we don't really have any idea how many people will be coming through here. So I think that's one of the reasons Nana was not enthused to continue. There's a couple other things that they cited in their press release. The details escape me right now. But the main thing that I think about with this is just one more example of the uncertainty around Alaska projects causing investors to pull out. These are things that they have to commit to, that it takes time and money, and it is a difficult decision to make. And if you can't actually get everyone on the same page, and it's flip-flopping between administrations, for a decade, that's going to be a problem for a lot of people. So that's my main takeaway from Nana's pullout on this.
I mean, it is. It's tough when you can't plan on anything. I mean, again, going back to their previous comment of, well, we haven't seen a single mine, that's been planned or permitted, well, it's because we don't know what you're going to do. We don't know what the federal government's going to do. We don't know what the state's going to do. We don't know, we don't know about any of that stuff. And that's, of course, part of the problem is, as like you said, there's an uncertainty around development in Alaska, because they just have no idea which direction which stakeholder is going to go. There's so many different people involved, whether it's the feds or the state or native corporation or whoever. They've just got no idea. There's a lot of moving parts in there, and it makes it more difficult. Now, you were talking about how this was mandated. I mean, the ANILCA, the language in ANILCA says the commissioner or the Secretary of the Interior shall permit this. Not a maybe, not a if you feel like it, not if, there was enough ducks in a row to get it done. You shall do it. I mean, that is, that's pretty strident there. That's pretty much a you must have. And how do they get around that? And then how do they react to that when you say, well, it says it shall be done, and they say, well, we can't. What's the next move?
Yeah, it seems pretty unambiguous to me. I'm no lawyer. That's obviously something the courts are going to need to find out here. But what I think, there's a couple of plausible arguments. The one that the Interior Department seems to be taking right now is that, ANILCA doesn't say anything about Bureau of Land Management lands. It just talks about, Interior Department lands. And then, of course, you don't necessarily have to do that. The other thing I've heard is, potentially that, well, it says we have to go through the permitting process. It doesn't say that we have to actually say yes at the end of that process. So I'm very curious to see how this shakes out. I assume the state of Alaska will take a lawsuit on this one. I don't really know though, because without Nana's support, they will have to potentially, they could submit another plan and go through this whole permitting process again, and they could revise the route potentially to avoid lands that would have this environmental impact statement.
Right.
That's a possibility. Mostly, I think there will be a lawsuit, and perhaps we'll see something different in the next administration. I'm very curious to see where it goes. I think a lot of people have different opinions on this, but I believe, the Bureau of Land Management and Interior Department were finding what they wanted to find with this one.
Well, yeah, and this is going to be interesting because if it does get back, I mean, hypothetically, if it becomes a new Trump administration
Mhm.
and then they reverse themselves again, what does that show to, every entity in the world that it's just become this great tug of war between, you know, two administrations that battle it out. I mean, if something happens in one administration and then the next administration just completely reverses it, I mean, it it's almost the hallmarks of a banana republic. I think J.D. Tucci wrote about, some of the banana republic stuff that was happening in America. But that's almost some of that kind of hallmark of that kind of stuff, where we don't have the rule of law. We have this fiat rule where the administration comes in and makes some kind of executive decision. Oh, we're going to reverse that, and everything else. I mean, it's I mean, it's embarrassing, but it's also dangerous in that regard. Um, but the question is, and I don't know if you've given this any thought, but somebody mentions the Chevron defense. Now that Chevron deference is gone, that could have an impact on this new lawsuit. But the question, I guess, again, will Nana play ball if that's the case? If it remains a private road or a commercial road, what are your thoughts on this, on the potential for a lawsuit, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I think Chevron actually really has some potential to change things for this particular issue, as well as kind of natural resource development in general. For those of you who are not familiar, the Chevron doctrine basically said that, when there's some confusion over, technical expertise, you defer to the executive branch department that's promulgating those regulations and rules. And so the Supreme Court, up until, just this past session, wasn't able to look so much at the facts of these things, but had to kind of look at this from the legal perspective instead of being able to actually judge some of this technical stuff. So what I'm looking forward to, and hopefully this will take place, is we'll see some reevaluation of some of these cases where the Supreme Court's looking at this data and figures and making some scientific judgments, and they can actually critique this stuff. It's a lot wider than environment policy. There's just been a slew of articles about how the Chevron doctrine will or will not affect healthcare policy and taxes and regulations and all of these different things. So check them out. Whatever you think about the issue, you'll find an article saying that. But it really could be transformative once we see how things shake out.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Chevron deference basically said that if there was any ambiguity in a law, if there was any gray area or uncertainty about a law, then the court's requirement was that they basically kowtowed to the federal government agency that was promulgating the rule to say, well, then they decide. If there's any gray area, the agency wins, essentially, in whatever argument that's going on there. And that's a dangerous precedent. And if you read the decisions and the opinions of the justices, that when they finally said it, there's like, this is probably, well, except Kentucky Brown, she was like, this is the worst thing ever because this takes all the power away from the federal government. Yes, it does. But
We like it.
yeah, I mean, I think that's not that like that's a bad thing, but I mean, I think it makes it very clear that this allows judges to, even in layman's terms, even if it's a highly technical issue,
Mhm.
look, if a lawyer or an expert witness can't explain to a judge or somebody in simple terms how something works or what the difference is, and they can't, and they can't make that decision, then that's part of the problem. And I think that's what the justices finally said, is that they said, look, people, the judges, that's their job, is to judge the law, not have their hands tied by some executive or anything else. And this ties deeper, Sarah, into something that we've talked about in the past, which is the abdication of Congress from writing good laws, right? They write these broad frameworks, and then they hand it over to the bureaucrats and say, you guys fill in the blanks, and we'll just nod and everything else. And the Chevron deference means anything that they wrote, which is not subject to congressional approval, is law, and you have nothing to say about it. It's increased the bureaucratic state in this country.
Yeah, I was just thinking that when you started, Congress has gotten into this, contest over how ambiguous they can write their laws so that, the federal government agencies and, departments, anyone can interpret this however they'd like in order to make that happen. And then they have to accept that. So I'm really, really excited to see where things go. I don't think it's going to be the doom of, all of these good environmental regulations and all these things. A lot of people are worried about it. I'm not. It's going to be a good thing.
Well, I mean, Brad Keithley said something about, the law and the oil and gas laws and everything. And I'm just like, come on, if you can't explain something in simple English to a judge and say, this is how it works, so we don't have to get down into the molecular level, but we can explain to you in broad strokes how this works. If you can't do that, then somebody's not doing their job, right? I mean, it's just the bottom line. And you're basically kowtowing good. All right, let's go back to Ambler Road. Sorry, we kind of went far afield there because I was rambling. So Ambler Road, you just said it earlier, kind of dead unless Nana comes back to the table. But the Chevron deference is going to make a difference in the courts, because courts is give us your next step. So you think it's probably going to go to court. Does it mean it goes anywhere in the future? And what does it mean for the Ambler Mining District in the long run? Your thoughts?
Yeah, it's fascinating. I have seen a lot of Alaska's projects not come to anything, and so that's why I am, potentially negative on the actual outlook of Ambler. I'm hoping that we will see a state of Alaska lawsuit and that it is successful under Chevron challenge, and that potentially in November there will be a new administration that is more willing to reconsider this. But I think the broad strokes of this is that this is wasting a lot of people's time and money because we can't actually decide on something. And that's my general frustration, is just that it shouldn't take this long. We should be able to figure this out. If we can do this safely, then we should know that we can do it safely and it'll be done. So that's what I'm hoping to see. The Ambler Mining District is a really, pretty promising mine for a bunch of different minerals that are economically significant. So I'm hoping we would see some mine development there. There's only been one feasibility study for a mine up in that area. So maybe we'll see more companies willing to go in and, actually get some economic estimates on that.
Right.
But, they kind of need a road first.
Yeah. Well, it's not like we're building a nuclear waste disposal facility. We're building a road. I mean, again, it's not, we're not talking about contamination we're building a road to go in there, something that's been going on for millennia. But, we got to make sure everybody's okay on this. So, well, we'll watch to see what happens. It'll be interesting to see what if the state files the suit, if they do, and what the deference now that Chevron's gone, what will that mean?
Mm-hmm.
And if Nana will trust anyone anymore, because like you said, they'd already given their blessing on this. And then the feds were like, well, and we could turn it into a public road afterwards. And they're like, whoa, wait a second. That's not what we agreed to.
Exactly.
So it will be an interesting, it'll be interesting to watch to see what it goes on, because I mean, if Alaska can't develop her resources, where do we go from here?
Exactly. Yeah, I don't know what our state will do if we continue to be closed off like one big nature preserve. It's our economy at stake.
It's exactly, that is the future of what we're doing right here is, resources. It's resource or die kind of thing. We've got to get our resources out there and get things rolling. All right. Sarah Montalbano is our guest. You know her here from Montalbano Mondays. She's formerly with the Alaska Policy Forum. She's been doing some of her own writing. Now she's published in the Wall Street Journal. Things are looking up in the world for Sarah. She's moving on up. I feel like she should be singing the Jefferson song right now, getting things ready to go. We're going to be back with more in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. One final segment here, and we will return. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
We call it the Flavor Saver. That's why we dip our beard in coffee. The Flavor Saver. We just save it for later. A little beard in the. Oh, she just made an ear. She's like, ooh. Yeah, I know it's gross.
Nasty.
Nothing like a little coffee flavored whisker for you. All right. Congrats, Sarah, on moving up. I will miss your reads on AK-12. But K through 12. We're still gonna let her talk with us about that stuff. In fact, we may let her talk with it about it here in a second, unless she's got something else to say on Ambler that we missed. Did we hit it all? I think we got it all, didn't we?
I think we got it. I came prepared to talk about Nantucket's wind turbine disaster as well, but we don't have to talk about that if that's not interesting. I just think
I'm all about that. I'm going to let you drive the bus a little bit. That's fine. That works for me.
Thank you.
Frank says, why didn't the state use eminent domain? On what? On NANA? That's sovereign. Again, Alaska Native claims, that's like sovereign land, right? That's like reservation land. That's like tribal. That's like down in the States. The police can't go on tribal land because it's sovereign territory. Am I misreading that, Sarah, or is that how you're reading it?
My impression is eminent domain is over, private land. So I would agree with that. I don't think they're allowed to do that, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean,
that would not be a viable path.
By the way, I'm not a fan of that either, by the way.
No.
Let me just say, the state's going to come in with eminent domain and take what's yours, and you're going to like it. Joel says, I could listen to her voice all day. She's going to get her to work for NPR. This is Sarah Montalbano.
Half of it's the podcast mic.
It is the podcast mic. You got just the mic to make you sound great. That's the thing. Let's see. Nana agreed to allow their membership and locals to use the road when they found out that would not last because of equal access and state funding. That would not last because of equal access. Oh, because they would have to allow equal access. Is that why? What you're saying there, Frank? Anyway, well, it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, this is the problem. We were promised at statehood that the feds would take care of the infrastructure in the state, right? I mean, that was part of the deal. Okay, you'll be a state and we'll build your infrastructure. And yet, I mean, they haven't built a new road in, how long? And then they start talking about roads or bridges, and it's always a bridge or a road to nowhere. Well, everywhere is a bridge to nowhere until you build it, and then there's something on the other side to go to, right? I mean, I'm not trying to be too facetious here, but a road to nowhere, it's always nowhere until you build it, and then people go there, and then it becomes somewhere. Am I wrong, Sarah?
Reductive but true. That's how I feel about it. And it doesn't mean that every project that we're looking at here needs to be approved. I really don't feel all that strongly about the details of every project, but I do know that we can figure this out and it can be done, quickly. It doesn't need to take a decade. That's my general principle on things. We can figure this out. The science didn't change between the Trump administration and the Biden administration. We looked at the same things. That's what gets me about this whole issue.
No, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, it shouldn't take, again, we're not building a nuclear waste disposal facility or something, a graphite, we're building a road. We're not even building the mine. We're just building the road to a mining area. Sure, there may be mines that require more oversight and more in-depth
And they
analysis.
will all have to do their own environmental
Yeah,
impact statements, all of them.
exactly. This is just a road. That's the thing that's mind-blowing. This is a road, but I think you're right. I think there is a people out there. There is a group of people out there who just believe that Alaska should remain locked up, that it should remain just, they would be happy if Alaska was nothing more than just a national park. And one day we may tap into it for I guess it's the piggy bank. It's the reserve, right? I mean, we're the land bank for the rest of the world for all the resources. I guess that's the answer.
Mhm. But mines take time to build. If we're going to have
Yeah.
these things, we got to start before the emergency starts.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's
how I feel
exactly
about
it. We have to, you can't, you got to start planning now because this is all down the roads, stuff ever. So
Mhm.
it's good. All right. We got to, what? I don't know. Tim just said something and I totally threw my thought train off about pizza and moose's tooth. And I don't know what, isn't the eminent domain strategy some of the wind farm developers in the Midwest? Well, I don't know. We'll see. Sarah's going to talk with us about wind farms and more. We're going to continue on here. The Michael Luke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Please like and share. Like and follow, subscribe, ring the bell, do all the YouTube-y things and everything else that are, and when I say, people say, well, where's the bell? Well, when you hit subscribe, there's a little bell over on YouTube that clicks you to get your notifications. So hit the subscribe button, then ring the bell. That's what you do. That's how you do it.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
Man, that guy is so mean to me all the time. Sarah, I don't know why I put up with it. Sarah Montalbano is our guest. You can find her at sarahmontalbano.substack.com. That's Montalbano. Sarah Montalbano at substack.com for Montalbano Mondays, which we coined here to begin with. She owes me a nickel every time somebody says it.
Tally it up.
I know, really tally it up. We'll get to $1 one day. So here we are talking. We just finished talking about Ambler. You said you've got some other energy issues that you've been paying attention to, including a wind turbine disaster down in the south of Kentucky. What's going on? What's what do we need to know, and why is it important?
Yeah, so this is finally starting to hit the news this past week. It actually happened before off the coast of Martha's Vineyard in Nantucket. Not last week, but the week before that, a wind turbine blade fell offshore and is now leaving sharp fiberglass shards on the beach. That's a quote. That's not me exaggerating anything. And so I kind of wanted to highlight this because this has taken a long time to kind of break the news cycle. And, we hear a lot about the trade-offs of coal and natural gas and nuclear, but we don't hear a lot about the trade-offs of wind and solar until there are incidents like this. So basically, wind turbine blade fell off, is washing up shards of fiberglass onto the beaches and in Nantucket. And this wind farm, it's owned by Vineyard Wind, who is now taking some heat. But they kept it quiet for a couple of days, it sounds like. And now, they're doing this cleanup. They've commissioned an environmental assessment report, and they've said, well, it's non-toxic. Where's my quote? It's a really interesting quote that they have here.
It's non-toxic, but don't walk on it, whatever you do.
Inert, non-soluble, stable, and non-toxic. The report says the primary risk from the turbine blade is physical injuries to those who come into contact with debris, such as sharp fiberglass on public beaches. So if you've got a trip planned, watch out for sharp fiberglass on the beaches, and we will see how this cleanup goes. But this is really shocking to the whole community there because the turbines only started in January. And GE has come out and said, yeah, there was a manufacturing deviation, and they're checking all the other turbines. But I think it's important to highlight because there is no such thing as an impact-free clean energy. There's always stuff like this. There's always trade-offs.
So this turbine's only been in operation for 6 months, and it already blew one off, and now it's floating up on shore, and people are like shocked, I tell you, that they should have any impact on them in the, we were talking about this the other day, the amount of energy required to create these clean energy solutions, whether it's the amount of energy required to manufacture and construct a single solar panel or a deep cell lithium battery, like one of these big batteries for either a home unit or for like a Tesla or something. The amount of resources that go into these things. I mean, sure, they're all great once they're up and running, but the thing that they never analyze in the overall analysis is what did it cost to produce this, X component that you're touting as a green, emission-free component. And nobody really has ever done the well, I mean, there are people who have done the analysis, but it gets skimmed over by everybody else, right? That sure, wind power and solar power, those are all great things, but nobody ever analyzes what does it take to get to a finished product, how much carbon footprint is on that.
That's a huge focus of the work at American Experiment, actually, that I've joined onto in the past couple months. One of the things that we don't think about a lot with wind and solar is, of course, they're intermittent. So when the wind's not blowing and the sun's not shining, you can't actually hold that energy in the electrical grid. It's very simple for me to reach down, plug in something into the wall outlet, and then there's electricity. But that has to be balanced by the utility precisely to get that electricity generated and off to me. So you can't use that. So that gets curtailed. That's a cost, usually because you still have to kind of pay the solar and wind farms for that electricity, even if you can't use it. The other thing, though, is just because they're intermittent, you still pretty much have to build the same number and backup of natural gas plants and other things that can actually be turned on. Dispatchable is the phrase for it. And that's kind of pretty much on a one-to-one basis. Your wind and solar can help at times, but when you really do need that in a cold winter, like in Alaska or Minnesota, you have all the costs of building up this backup too. And then of course there are the environmental impacts. You need the mining for the lithium in your solar panels, and if you aren't doing that responsibly, that could have huge impacts. So it's a lot of stuff to quantify. It's a lot of stuff we need to think about. And one of the things that I think is really dishonest in this kind of conversation is, low cost of energy. When we talk about levelized costs, we say, well, wind and solar are cheaper. And that's really only if you're not including any of those things. You're looking on the minute when you can use that electricity. And a lot of the times they're citing wholesale costs to utilities. They're not talking about what the residential ratepayer actually pays. So
Right.
I've been learning a lot about this in the past couple months. So apologize.
Well,
for
no,
that.
I mean, I think it's an important discussion, and we keep hearing about this push to renewables, this push to green, this push to, all those things. And unfortunately, what we get fed, I think we as the public get fed a lot of time, is, like you said, a snapshot into the moment of everything's up and running. Boom, here's a snapshot of what it looks like. Okay, so solar's cheaper, wind is cheaper, and everything else, but they didn't talk about acquisition cost, manufacturing cost, the impact of, again, I read one time, and this is a few years ago, and so maybe things have changed. Forgive me if things have changed. I think it's been, well, since I moved down here, so it's been within the last 10 years. I read this article that talked about, it was the life cycle of a solar panel, and it basically said that, as you started the thing and they went through all the process of what it took to build it and everything else. And essentially what they were saying was at the end of the life cycle of the solar panel, you had virtually consumed all the savings, all the green impact savings that you would have had from the solar panel had actually been consumed in the manufacturing process, and then the use and then the waste of it, because you couldn't recycle certain component. You can't recycle them all, right? You can recycle part of it, but they can't. And so basically they were saying in the life cycle of it, it actually cost more in the terms of the actual impact on the environment than it would to not have the solar panel. They weren't advocating to not have. They're just saying we should have an honest conversation about this kind of stuff. And that's the thing. Everybody gets their little piece of something, and so they put their spin on it. Nobody ever talks about what does it cost to build a lithium battery for an electric car. And if the life of the car is only 7 years, 10 years, then what do we do with these batteries, which we can't recycle? We can't, I mean, there's yards now that are full of electric vehicles that are they're dead because the batteries are done. I mean, what do you do now? What goes on?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge, challenging problem, and recycling of a lot of these things is difficult. Wind turbine blades, because they are fiberglass, are also not very recyclable, so they pile up in junkyards too. I'm seeing all sorts of people in the chat saying, "Well, my hybrid or my EV is really great." That's fine. I want you to be able to have those options, and you should be able to buy that if that's what you choose. What I'm not generally a fan of, though, is having all these subsidies and fingers on the scale to tip things in that direction.
Right.
It's obviously an option, but it is something that I think we need to be thinking about the trade-offs more, especially because, look, if I go replace my 2004 Ford Expedition right now, I run out and buy a new EV. I've already paid the capital costs of that Ford. That is not something that I need to pay for anymore. And what we're seeing is the same thing on the electrical grid. We have all sorts of mandates to start shutting down coal plants. The EPA has a new power plant rule that will effectively do that. And that's going to make things expensive too, because you're shutting down things you've already paid for in order to pay more to build something new.
Right.
So that's,
Which may
it
not
makes
be
sense
as
for you.
certain, which may not be as certain or consistent as the older technology, right?
Exactly.
I mean, that's part of the problem. Again, we talk about the consistency and the persistency of things like wind and solar and things like that. They are not as constant, and that is part of the problem. And to shut down things that are proven and paid for, it's
Yeah.
it's going to be problematic. All right, down to the last 90 seconds here, Sarah. So I'm going to give you the final thoughts here for today. What should we be watching for? What else are you writing about? Give it to us right now.
Thank you. Thank you all for having me. You guys are an awesome audience. I am just continuing to kind of work on these energy issues, and follow me on American Experiment. Go subscribe to my Substack, sarahmontalbano.substack.com. I'm really trying to stay active on this stuff and talk about this stuff more, because I do think they're important. I think we're not thinking about trade-offs. We're not thinking about the trade-offs of not building here in Alaska. So watch for news on Ambler Road, get involved in your communities. I say the same things a lot because that's how I feel. Get involved in your local community.
Say the same things a lot because people are not listening enough to you. I
Hurry.
told you so. We want
Go
Sarah
do
to be
it.
on. I told you so. Yeah, follow Sarah on The American Experiment, and of course, Sarah Montalbano.substack.com for Montalbano Mondays. Sarah, thanks for coming on board and joining us. We appreciate it. As always, it's a pleasure to speak with you.
Thanks for having me.
Sarah, hold the line for a second. Ben Carpenter is going to be our guest up next, The Michael Duke Show. Yeah, it kind of blows my mind, Sarah. There's a lot that blows my mind, but the fact that these folks who continue to go on and on and on about, oh, we have to have this renewables in place and green energy and everything else. And I'm like, okay, great. So tell me, how much does it cost to get there in terms of money, time, energy, mining, resources? What does it take to get a full Tesla wall into every house, and and et cetera, et cetera. And then what is the long-term effects of that? If it's only valid for 7 to 10 years, then what do we do with those things at the end of 7 to 10 years, and how do we replace them again for 7 to 10 years? I'm driving cars that are 25 years old, right? I mean,
Exactly. Mine just hit 20.
yeah, I've got I've got cars in my driveway right now that are older than you are, probably, Sarah. I mean, at this point, not really, but we've still got cars that drive that are 35 years old. Right now, I've got friends who are driving cars that are 30, 20, 30 years old. No big deal. If it was a Tesla or if it was some full EV, unless you're willing to pay big bucks to have that battery replaced and essentially buy a new battery or a new car's worth of battery every 10 years, which they really haven't reached that point to figure it out yet, right? I mean, we're not. And if they hadn't been subsidized by the government in many ways, people would not have embraced it which again raises the question about the free market. Shouldn't the free market decide on that instead of the government interventionism and the subsidies to make it more attractive to people to take these technologies that may end up costing us more in the long run?
Yeah, I do have to hop, but I did want to point out everyone should go look at my Substack today because I'm republishing a piece that looks at an economic working paper that shows the actual tax credit allocation to various income quintiles. And the big thing that shocked me, the top 5% of households' income households, wealthiest 5%, got 50% of EV tax credits. Shocking. So, it's not encouraging uptake for people who wouldn't otherwise be buying this. This is just not an effective policy. So I gotta
All right.
go, but thank you all for having
Thanks,
me,
Sarah.
and have me back anytime.
Appreciate it. It's good to talk with you, sir. Thank you so much. Appreciate you coming on. Sarah Montalbano, our guest here on the program. All right, let's test the audio. I see Ben Carpenter is ready he's in the green room here hanging out. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Michael. I'm doing very well. How's the audio?
Audio is good. Audio's good. Video's good. You feeling summery? Is it all good?
Yeah, we got liquid sun.
Oh, you just broke up. Now you just locked up. All right. Bro, liquid sunshine. Is that what you said? Little bit of liquid sunshine. Yeah. It was a perfect weekend until about 4 p.m. yesterday here. I mean, it was bright, sunny, blue skies, and about 4 p.m. the skies opened up and it became the perfect Monday weather on a Sunday night. So it's all been good. All right, Ben, well, you all ready to you ready to dive into this and get into some of the details of what's coming up in the next session?
Yeah, sure.
All right, good. All right, Ben Carpenter is our guest. Who we've been he was kind enough to come on board this last week and talk with us for a few minutes about some of the madness that's going on in the legislature, which I'm sure we'll touch base back on again. All right, well, hold the line here, Ben. I'm going to pull you back into the green room here, and then I'm going to pull all these pieces down and go over here and see if we can answer a few questions here. What's going on? See what you guys have been talking about. The new improved green grift, the greenbacks. Yeah, I mean, again, how much of this stuff has been, is only been embraced because the government has thrown billions of dollars at it in an attempt to make it more mainstream and make it more affordable. And what they're showing is that the demand for EVs is still dropping off. I mean, there's a market for them, sure, absolutely. But it's not going to take over the world in the way that they think it's going to, especially since we don't have a real handle on the life cycle of it and everything else. Tim says, my Tesla's left my shop exactly three times this year. I don't drive it anywhere. Okay. Well, good. I mean, I guess, is that good or bad? Is it you don't drive it because you don't want to keep it, you don't want to scratch it? Or, I mean, what's the reason behind that? How about Brett Rotterman quitting the assembly after Barbara Haney's ethics review? Oh, there's a lot of stuff to talk about on that. But my understanding is that he's pulling that back is what I'm hearing right now. I've heard that he has rescinded that he was so agitated and angry. I actually spoke to him on Friday after it happened. But my understanding since then is that he has rescinded that. So I haven't spoke to him about it since then, but we'll see if we can get some answers for you on that. But the last thing I heard was that he had rescinded his resignation and that he was going to stick around. We'll see what's going on. Barbara just said it's not over in the chat room. She just said it's not over. This whole thing is nuttier than squirrel poo. All right. Willie says, I love listening to Sarah. Me too. Love having Sarah on. She's so good. I guess I'm going through here to see if there's anything else. Jeannie says that Elon will convert to hydrogen. Harold says the future is hydrogen. Why? EV isn't going to replace fossil fuels. I think that hydrogen is probably, again, makes more sense in the long run. They've got to get the kinks worked out of it. But I still think, again, just because of the whole thing with the batteries and the anyway, nobody cares what I think on that. Here we go. Hour 2 dead ahead.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning and welcome to the Monday edition of the show. It is just, well, liquid sunshine, as Ben just told us here during the break. A little bit of liquid sunshine out there everywhere, but hopefully you had a good weekend to make up for it. We're continuing now. We just finished up with Sarah Montalbano from the American Experiment. And she, of course, is formerly with the Alaska Policy Forum. We were just talking about the Ambler Road. It was an interesting discussion. And if you missed it, you can come back and get us and get it on the podcast or whatever. But meanwhile, let's just jump into this and get things started. In this hour, we're going to be talking with Ben Carpenter, who is a former state or who is a state representative and now running for the state Senate down there on the peninsula in District D. He joins us this morning to talk about, well, a little bit of everything. And we were lucky enough to speak with him last week. I asked him to call in. I invited him to call in for a few short minutes when we were talking about some of the issues that were facing us. And he had been commenting on them, and it was good to have him on. But let's get started here this morning and just treat it like it's a brand new thing. Good morning, Ben. How are you?
Good morning, Michael. Doing great.
Well, thanks for coming on here and being part of this, and thanks for all you do. I know you've been fighting the good fight out there for people who've been following along and understand what you've been doing. You've been really fighting the good fight for a fiscal policy for Alaska and a better future for Alaska. But for folks who don't know who you are, can you tell us a little bit about you and where you come from and everything else, and then we'll get on to this last session and what you see coming forward in the next one, and the important things that we need to talk about here.
Yeah, sure. Michael's good to be with you this morning. And for those that don't know me, I'm Ben Carpenter. I've lived in Nikiski most of my life, or I've at least called it home most of my life. My parents moved up here when I was 9 and settled in Nikiski. My dad worked in the oil patch out in Cook Inlet. And when I graduated high school, I left the state for school, and then joined the military and spent basically the next 20 years in Air Force and Army. Had several deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, and then retired out of the Alaska Army National Guard in 2018, the same year that I was elected to the state legislature. And when we came back from military service, we purchased the property that my parents had settled in here in Nikiski and put in a commercial peony farm, which we still manage today, and had a really good crop this year. Um, yeah, super excited about Alaska and our possibilities. We just we're our own worst enemy sometime, and sometimes we need to get out of our own way.
That is the truth. We are in a lot of ways our own worst enemies. It's definitely frustrating to watch, especially when I've been covering this stuff for 20 years, and I've been unfortunately saying the same essential things for 20 years, and it never ceases to amaze me how people they fail to recognize the repetition of historical problems. Ben, if you could summate the number one problem in the state right now, in just a short statement or phrase or paragraph or whatever, what is the biggest problem that the state of Alaska faces right now in the legislature, either chamber or whatever? What is the biggest problem we face right now?
I'm glad you qualified that with what's the biggest problem the legislature faces. So, I mean,
Otherwise, it's a big problem. Yeah.
our constitutional responsibility is to pass a budget each year, and we are not very long-term oriented. So I would have to say that our biggest challenge is not having a long-term focus on the finances of the state. We come together every year and are very myopic with regards to how the state is spending money, and even the processes that get us to the position that we're at, January through May, on looking at the budget. We just don't stop and think about how we're doing what we're doing and how does that impact where we want to be in a decade or 2 decades. And that's the biggest problem that I see is just a real short-term thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the lack of long-term thinking or lack of long-term planning in this state has been a historical mainstay, I think, for 40 or 50 years. We just can't see. I mean, even Hammond talked about that, after we got that first big royalty payment in 69 or 70. And I mean, that's 55 years ago, we got that first payment and then they burned through it. And he's like, well, wait a second. Where's the long-term vision of what we do with this? And that's where it all started. So let's take a look at, what we're facing right now. This last session, all the oxygen in the room was sucked up by a discussion regarding the education spend and the base student allocation. We had a fight over, a minor fight over the defined benefits. It got out of the Senate, but it really didn't go anywhere from there. But I know that it's coming back because you're already hearing about it as a talking point for some of the local folks who are running for re-election. So it's going to be a sticking point. And then, of course, we've got the energy issues in Cook Inlet, which is going to affect not just South Central, but eventually will trickle up and affect the whole rail belt utility grid in the long run. So let's talk about those as some of the biggest issues that we have here. And of course, the PFD and a long-term fiscal plan, which I know you've fought for, tried to get the PFD constitutionalized. That didn't go anywhere. So let's talk about kind of this whole last session and your thoughts on all the different pieces that I just touched on and where do we go from here?
Well, Michael, we have to recognize last session was the beginning of an election year. And so
Yep.
accomplishing things in an election year is always, change, things that are risky in some people's eyes or politically risky. That's always going to be a challenge in your second session of your legislature. You really got to
Right.
establish the foundations for a conversation and begin again in the next legislature in the first session, because it's very difficult to get things done.
Well, and
in the
in
second
fair
session.
disclosure, we did say going into this session that we knew that this session would be very set in its ways, that we weren't expecting a lot to be accomplished because we knew that it was an election year it was an off session, kind of lame duck for some of the folks and everything else, and that people were going to be focused on getting in, getting out, and getting onto the election trail. But I mean, again, this discussion about education did kind of blow up bigger than I think many people expected it to.
Well, the leadership in the House, we discussed um, getting the education conversation started very early, and that's what we did, or at least attempted to do, through the passage of our bills early on, to deal with the education problem, both from a systemic funding issue, compromise on funding, and attempted to improve the quality of our education through measures with correspondence funding and charter schools. So, um, yeah, I mean, we recognize that the education issue is always going to be at the forefront of Alaskans' minds. It is a very important thing for the legislature to deal with. Um, we're just dealing with it in a very short term um, focus, and some of that is calculated, right? If you've already always have a crisis, then you can always make a big deal out of it. And I tell you, for 6 years, I don't have. I can probably count on one hand the number of times I've had a conversation with the establishment, your union leaders and your
Right.
administrators,
Right.
on how to improve the quality of education. I I can guarantee you that just about every conversation that I've ever had in the legislature is about funding, money. Just spend more money on the current establishment and the current way we're doing schooling. And that is what so overcoming this inertia to do absolutely nothing about many topics, education just being one of them, is it's a problem. And one of the reasons why I think it's necessary for me to jump over to the Senate, which affords me an opportunity to have a couple more years to work between election cycles to accomplish some of these things that I think are important.
Well, I mean, I think you're 100% right. I mean, I have asked the question for many years, is there something fundamentally flawed in our education system? Because the answer to every question when it comes to education and the metrics and the product that they're delivering has always been, well, if we had more money, we could make it work right. If we had more funding, we could make it work right. And we've seen this ever expanding amount of money where it's now the second largest item in the budget. Over $2 billion, 2.4 billion on education. And yet we're still delivering essentially the same aptitude, the same graduation rate, the same, it's still a subpar product, quote unquote, in what they're delivering for the children. But the answer is, well, the only reason it is because we don't have enough money. And that just can't be the only answer, because you've again been that pool has been expanding for years. Something else has got to change, because the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we have to recognize that there are institutions and there are families who are able to provide a quality education for their children with much less money thrown at the problem. So the process that we've got right now, in my estimation, and speaking with teachers and parents, there's one critical component that's missing in our education system right now, in many classrooms, and that is parental control. And I have been kind of shifting my focus just a little bit this last year. It's not just about fixing the bureaucracy. It's about getting parents back in control of the classroom. That is what's going to change the culture, both inside the building, inside the classroom, inside the schooling system, and what changes the culture ultimately outside the classroom. Teachers complain, hey, you know what? We got some parents that want to participate, and we got some parents that have just washed their hands of the responsibility of educating their kids. And I think to some extent that's true. So how do you bring parents back into the classroom in a manner that benefits and supports teachers in getting that quality of education back? Well, We've got a perfect model for it. It's working well in our charter schools where parents actually have control of the budget of the school. They hire the leadership, the principal, they set the policies, and they pick the curriculum. Another major critique I hear from teachers is they're like, every 4 or 5 years, our curriculum's changing because we've got this rotating machine that wants to sell the school district's new curriculum. The process by which we're signing up and paying for curriculum causes us to have to change whether we need to or not. And well, who's doing that? That's the administration. That's the bureaucracy. Well, you're only going to combat that if you've got the actual owners of the education system being involved and empowered to help make those decisions. And that's why getting the parents in charge of our schools is so doggone important.
Ben Carpenter is our guest. We're up against the break. We're going to take a quick hiatus here, and we'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show continues. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. We return with more. And Ben Carpenter, candidate for Senate District D, right after these messages.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, we're in the break right now. Ben Carpenter is our guest. David says, how do we get parents involved? Some districts say that, but really don't want parents in their school. It's hard to even see the curriculum, what their kids are being taught. And so what is the answer there, Ben? I mean, how do we get more parents involved? I've never had a problem with that because we homeschooled all our kids, which is like the ultimate expression of parental involvement. But I mean, how do you do that?
Yeah, the homeschooling, that is parents saying, hey, we're going to take responsibility for the education of our kids, and we're going to pull away from the system just a little bit, right? Some parents are completely disconnected through an homeschooling experience that doesn't have any involvement in the state, but others are through a correspondence program where the state helps with the funding piece of it. But so the really good question is, how do you get parents back involved with the school? And we have to recognize that that's not an easy thing to do. It's not something that's quick to do. And it's one part culture change, right? So how many parents now just don't participate in school because there's no mechanism for them to really meaningfully participate? They could go to a council, but it's advisory only. And if your principal doesn't care what your site council wants, then it's pointless to attend, right? There's no teeth, there's no responsibility and power for parents to actually influence what's happening in a school. So that is not the case with regard to charter schools. So the thing that we can do in each one of our schools is require a board of directors, which is similar to a school board, right? It's a board of directors for each one of the schools. That's what a charter school is. Just require parents to step up and be responsible for the curriculum choices for the school, for the policies in the school. I was surprised that the local school here in my area, it was just a couple of years ago that they put a cell phone policy in place that said no cell phones in the classroom. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, cell phones been around for a while, and we're allowing kids to be in school with their cell phones in classroom, and teachers are having to fight that battle of keeping the kids' attention while they're goofing off on their phone.
Yeah,
that's like common sense. Kids should not be on their phone while we expect them to be in the classroom learning.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and this is part of the whole issue that people have been going on and on about with charter schools is that they are built specifically around that parental involvement, right? I mean, that's the whole point. The whole point is that they are built around that parental involvement of you have to have parents who are part of a board of advisory or the board of directors, et cetera, et cetera. And so it forces them to be part of it. And that's, it is, again, it shows in the results that you're getting. Now, how do we mandate that for every school? I don't know if you can. But because some people just want to treat their kids like they're, a baby, treat their schools like they're babysitters. But we've got to find a way to make it work.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Hitting the ground running and expecting all parents to be completely on board with a new way of doing schooling in year one is probably unrealistic. I'm taking a longer term look and saying, hey, what would we do now if we wanted more parents to be involved 10 years from now? And I think that most schools could find 5 to 7 parents that would serve 2 to 3 years as the board of directors, as the managing parents of that school, and do that for a couple of years, and then step back and allow others to step forward. And then a decade later, you've had several sets of those parents rotate on and then off of the board that have control of the school. And now you've grown the number of people who understand what's happening in the school.
Ben Carpenter is our guest. There's a lot of questions in the chat room right now. A lot of comments here. Wish we could get into it, but we've got to jump back into it. So again, like and subscribe, ring the bell, do all the YouTube things, et cetera, et cetera. Let's get back into it. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio, The Michael Duke Show. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Oh, yeah. All right. We're continuing now. Ben Carpenter is our guest. We're talking with him. We've been talking with him about education because I think that is it's going to be one of the primary issues. This is coming back, right, Ben? This is, we're not done fighting this out over the whole, because they were talking about 1413 as a new BSA standard, and they only got to 650 or whatever. This is a battle that's not over in my mind. What about you?
Well, the battle's not over until the PFD's gone.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, and that's the big thing, and that's, you and I got talking about that here last week, so maybe we should maybe that's a good segue to move on over into that topic, is the PFD, because we have seen that become the wiffle ball, so to speak, over the last 7-8 years in the legislature. It's the one thing that's gotten batted around, with Walker's first veto of it, and then this slow, steady consumption of the whole thing. It's it's painful, but this is where we're at. The PFD is going to go away, and when it does, then they'll look at us like, well, there's two options. One is they look at us and go, free rides die hard, and it's time for you Alaskans to pay your fair share, and there will be some form of tax. Or there'll be a justification for moving the earnings reserve into the corpus, and then they'll start just overdrawing the fund and eating the seed corn. One way or the other, there will be no dividend, and we're going to have some serious issues moving on. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this isn't a choice issue, right? It's not the legislature choosing to consume the PFD with state spending. It is a systemic issue. We are going to consume the spending because the state government continues to grow, and we don't have an alternative but to pay for it with permanent fund earnings. Some assumptions there, right? One, oil revenues do the same thing that they've been doing in the past. They fluctuate. We have some more some years and less other years. But overall, unless we're continuing to drill for more oil, we have a steady decline of the amount of oil revenue that's coming into the state. Willow was a great project to have come on board, but we need more of them if we want an increasing amount of revenue coming to the state. That doesn't seem likely. So looking out a decade, it's more likely than not that our oil revenue continues to do what it has been doing over the last decade, which is be in decline. So the only place that the government growth can go to pay for state government is the permanent fund earnings. It's a systemic issue. It's a structural issue. It's the only place we can go for increased spending. And look, in the 6 years that I've been in the legislature, we added 650 some positions. I don't think all of those positions actually have people in them, but those positions were added, and then we added $600 million of personnel services to pay for it, right? So that's the increase in state spending to pay for jobs, for people to be employed. Well, some people. Some of those positions are just vacant and they use that money for other reasons, and that's, a different conversation. But the point, I'm using this as an analogy to show that government is going to continue to grow. Even if it's just going to grow at the rate of inflation, we're going to end up spending all of the permanent fund earnings on the growth of government because there is no other alternative. There's no other source of revenue that the state can look to pay for that growth. So if you're not going to slow the growth, if you're not going to put a functional spending limit on it, then that's your limit is going to be the amount of revenue you have. And our own finance department is telling us that if we keep doing what we're doing, it's just a matter of time. You're just looking at a couple of years down the road where you're not going to have enough money to do both state spending and permanent fund dividend. And that is the reality that we face. If we're not willing to do some other things, overcome that inertia to do nothing to rectify this problem. And what's really, really discouraging to me as a father and a grandfather, looking at where my kids are, wanting them to stay in Alaska, that our private sector economy is completely disconnected from what's happening in the state budget, right? Except for if you're in fishing or if you're in the oil industry, those are the only ways that you're, tourism. We got a lot of people that come to Alaska. The money they spend here has nothing to do with the state budget.
Right.
It empowers and helps local governments. It helps pay those bills, but it does nothing to help the state government.
It's, again, that's part of the problem is that, it's Parkinson's principle, which is essentially, work fills up to, or, work expands to fill up all available time. And it's the Parkinson's principle of government is the government expands to consume all available revenue, and then want more. And that's always been, my challenge with people like Brad and everything else to say, we need to start talking about this tax or that tax. And my problem is, well, they're just, if we get something new, they'll just spend it all. So the first answer to all of this has to be a reasonable and ironclad spending cap, right? I mean, that really has to be the first governor on all of this has to be a spending cap to hold back the spending, because obviously the legislature doesn't have the financial will to do it, the fiscal will to do it. It has to be something outside of that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the first component on the long-term fiscal plan that I'd put forward was to use Representative Stapp's constitutional spending limit, which basically tied government growth to the size of the private sector economy. So as our GDP, our state GDP increases, then you would have an ability to spend more in state government. That would help stabilize from year to year what the legislature can spend, but it would also incentivize the legislature to care about that private sector economy. We don't have a conversation about economic growth in the private sector right now. It isn't part of what we need to talk about with regard to spending federal dollars, permanent fund earnings, and oil revenue. It just doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah, because as long as the public economy is doing well, they feel like that's the answer, right? The public economy is doing well. That's then the economy, then that must mean the economy is doing well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the other component, the other piece here too, that kind of gets lost in the conversation is the cost of doing government. Unless you've put a concerted effort at getting more efficient, the cost of doing government is greater than what it needs to be. And that's maybe a bold statement and without any facts to back it up, but just on general principle, bureaucracies grow and they are inefficient. Government being the most inefficient way to do anything. So when was the last time we really stopped and put a concerted effort at improving how we do government in order to save money, to do it more efficiently? I mean, I've talked to some folks that are like, hey, we're still doing time cards on Excel spreadsheets. Well, that means there's got to be people hired to process those spreadsheets. When in all fairness to technology, we've been doing time cards on apps on phones and on computers for years now in the private sector to simplify this and reduce the burden, the administrative burden on processing time cards. Just something simple like that, where government is behind the times technologically.
Right. Well,
There's-
speaking of efficiencies, you've talked about, I mean, we talked about it here at the end of the last session, simply eliminating some of the empty positions, or defunding or not funding some of the empty positions, or, even just recapturing some of the money that had lapsed from previous years. And yet it's an uphill battle just to even have those conversations.
Yeah. So we identified about $300 million that was what we put in the category of positions that aren't filled, and some of those are legitimate. You have a natural churn of employees coming and going from any business, any government, and that's natural. So some of that represents that. But if you take away the positions that are a year old, you still have positions that have been on the books for years. I mean, if I remember correctly, Department of Fish and Game had a position that they've been holding on to and being appropriated money funded every year. And the last time somebody was actually employed in that position was 2014. So I know that there's bureaucratic maneuvering here that goes on to the money that gets appropriated for these positions to slide money into this for this need and slide it over here for that. And I know that that's, basically what's happening here. And all that slush fund does is just enable a bureaucracy to continue moving, accomplishing day-to-day tasks without actually stopping and fixing the root cause of problems. I looked at one of these, several of these positions were like full-time positions paying, I don't know, $30-some thousand. Really? You think you're going to get somebody to sign on to a full-time position only making $30,000? I mean, that's not likely to have many takers.
That may be why the position's been unfilled since 2014. And maybe that's why they keep it that low, because they know they can't fill it, but they'll still get the money for the position and they can use it as a slush fund, right? I mean, that's what they're doing.
Incentives matter, right? Whatever we incentivize, we're going to get more of. So all I'm saying is the bureaucracy has a process to fix that problem. There's pay studies and there's deliberate effort for people to identify why we can't fill those positions, but keeping them unfilled then pads our numbers to say, hey, well, we need defined benefits because we can't fill these positions because it's a retirement issue. I disagree. I disagree. I think that the workforce has shifted away from a defined benefits mentality, wearing the golden handcuffs and working for state government for 20 or 30 years. I think flexibility is key for people. They want to be able to move around. They don't know if they're going to stay in Alaska forever, and they want to be able to take their retirement with them. And which is why I authored a defined contributions bill to improve the quality of our retirement system for our police and firefighters and for our teachers, to help with that argument. Yeah, when we do a study and we compare our defined contributions retirement system to other states, with regard to our police and firefighters, we were a little less competitive than some other states. So let's increase that competitiveness. That seems like an appropriate thing to do.
As you say, the workforce has changed. I mean, there's been a lot of studies on this, especially post-COVID, where they looked at it and they saw the most important things for many of the millennial generation was the ability to have the flexibility to do things differently. And most of them had changed professions or changed jobs at least a dozen times, which is totally different than my generation or probably your generation of, wanting to find a good job and be there for 30 years or whatever. I mean, these kids, the different generations, Gen Z, millennials, etc., each one has a little bit of a different slice and take on life, and they have different priorities. And it wasn't as important for them to stay at a single place for 25 or 30 years. They wanted to change it around. And that's one of the reasons why we're seeing some of this job hopping that's going on everywhere, is because that's the feel of the whole generation. And one of the problems with the defined benefits, outside of the fact that you can't define what the benefit is 25 years from now, is that it does lock you in. You have to stay. If you want it, you've got to stay. And if you leave, you lose it. And is that attractive to people?
Yeah, imagine a bureaucracy that can say, you know what, we really don't have to deal with anything else. We've got you locked in. We don't have to be better managers. We don't have to be better leaders, because we know we've got you with the golden handcuffs, and you're going to be here regardless of whether our processes, whether we care for you as an employee, doesn't matter, because we know we've got you for your retirement. And
Right.
I think people on the outside of government are completely okay with having some sort of 401k style retirement system. It's the way private sector operates. It should be no different with respect to state government. And if we just point to the $6 billion of unfunded liabilities we have for our recently closed down defined benefit system, this is money that we're going to have to come up with in the future. And we're not an anomaly. Many states and municipalities are in a similar boat with respect to their defined benefit systems of having this debt out there that they have to pay for. Why would we add to that? It
Well,
makes no financial sense long term.
GM and Delta had to be bailed out by the federal government to get their defined benefits plans put to bed, because they couldn't. I mean, they was going to bankrupt them. They had to get a bailout to make it happen. So it's not just municipalities; it's everybody is spinning away from that. All right, we're gonna continue here. Ben Carpenter is our guest. One final segment dead ahead. What do we need to do, I guess, is the big question. We've been talking about, some of the details and some of the things that are problematic. What do we need to do? We'll continue this here in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes,
allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, we're in the break right now. Kyle says, gosh, why does Dunleavy continue to put these vacant positions in the budget year after year? I mean, the problem is the governor doesn't have the granularity, does he, to get down into a specific. I mean, he can't just specifically say, I'm going to line item veto out this vacant position. I mean, he has line item veto, but it's not down to that granular level, right, Ben?
Yeah, that's correct. But I would put that in the responsibility of the commissioner to get that in depth into the department. And honestly, this is why I put forward the Sunset Commission. HB 190 was modeled after the Texas Sunset Commission, which created a commission of Alaskans outside of, these are private sector people with experience on management, with experience on budgeting, with experience on process improvement, to come in and take a look at each one of our departments and recommend policy changes to gain efficiencies and to fix things that just don't make sense within the departments. Something that is not it's not happening within the legislature. We do not have the bandwidth to be able to get that level of detail during our session to fix it. So overcoming the inertia to do nothing, you got to do something different. And empowering, like Texas has done, empowering the Sunset Commission to review how state government is operating is, I think, necessary. What's the alternative?
Right. Well, the problem is you're being fought at every turn by people who want to keep essentially the business as usual going. I mean, this was the discussion again on the unfilled positions was, well, it's not really a problem. They don't really exist. What do you mean they don't really exist? I mean, the Senate finance co-chair said, well, that doesn't really exist.
Yeah. Well, the $300 million does.
I'm just going to say you spent millions of dollars on something that doesn't exist. And another legislator said, well, the money's being spent on good stuff. Well, if it's good stuff, why doesn't the legislature appropriate it instead of giving it to the bureaucracies to decide? I mean, that is your job, right? As legislators, you're there to appropriate, right?
Yeah. So our Executive Budget Act says that the legislature is supposed to tell the department what their performance measures are. So when they say, oh, it's being spent on good stuff, you say, okay, well, show me. What good stuff and what results did you achieve with those dollars? If you can't tell me that, if you can't show me the data, then I should be skeptical because you're supposed to be able to prove to a legislature that you've spent this money on X, Y, and Z, and this is the results I got with X, Y, spending on X, Y, and Z. That's currently hit or miss, not being done in the legislature.
Right. Well, I mean, and I'm not making this up, Ben, right? I mean, this is stuff that actually has happened on the floor, discussions that have happened about things like, I mean, it was not insignificant. $300 million is not an insignificant amount, even in a $6 billion budget. That's a pretty big chunk of money. And when they say it doesn't exist, it's not a problem, and they're spending it on good things anyway, I mean, this is what when your fellow legislators are saying stuff like that, it really kind of flies in the face of logic of what are we controlling? I mean, what are we controlling down there? I mean, who is in charge if that's the case down there?
Yeah, I guess, Michael, the only thing that I can say, not knowing who said that or what conversation, is that it's an example of not very deep thinking. We're just going to give a pass to the bureaucracy, to the state government, because, well, doggone it, everybody wants to do a good job. But that's just ignoring the nature of bureaucracy. Bureaucracies are inefficient. It's just turning a blind eye to the realities, and that's frustrating to me. I'll be honest.
No,
I want to tackle the hard problems.
Yeah, no, it is frustrating. And Kyle says, he writes the budget. Come on, it's not about granular veto. It's about writing his own damn budget. Well, I mean, that's great, Kyle, except for the fact that, again, he doesn't write the number. When he writes a budget, he doesn't get down into the number of PCNs in every department when he writes that budget. Now, maybe he writes it for $30,000 less because he expects them to cut that piece, but again, is that being spelled out in a governor's budget? I mean, it's yes. I mean, the governor does have some responsibility here, but we've also got an entrenched legislature and bureaucracy that does not want things to change, Ben.
Yeah. Part of HB 194, which is a Executive Budget Act bill, would have created estimating conferences, and those estimating conferences would have been responsible for or a way for the legislature to be able to and it looks like we're out of time here, but it would have allowed the legislature to have more control over the granularity of that data leading into the budget process, and be able to influence what the executive branch is putting into their budget.
Again, more details is not necessarily a bad thing as far as I'm concerned, because that gives you more things to chew on here. We're going to continue with Ben Carpenter, The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Here we go. Okay. Continuing on with Ben Carpenter right now, one final segment here. I mean, Ben, what's the answer here? What is the answer to this conundrum? You've attempted to make cuts. We talked about the 300 million. You've attempted to put in a fiscal plan. We keep hearing about, oh, you can't do that single subject rule. You can't roll them all together and into an omnibus bill because, well, I mean, reasons and everything else. So what is the answer here? How do we fix this?
That's a great question. And I'll begin that answer by saying elections have consequences. The thing that we do right now as Alaskans is we go get familiar with the Alaska Public Offices Commission website, and we go look at the candidates who are running for elected office. We look at their financial disclosures. There is a connection between who's receiving money from whom, and then what's happening with regard to focus on state budgets. And it doesn't take rocket science to figure it out. If the candidates that you're having to vote for have got a whole bunch of union money, public sector union money paying for their candidacy, well, then are you going to be shocked if they're going to support what the unions want once they get in? You shouldn't be. That's the lobby. That's the very effective lobby that goes on down in Juneau that says, hey, no, let's keep things the way they are. We don't need to make any changes. We just need to have additional defined benefits, or let's throw some money into education. And they're all looking at that nest egg, that permanent fund earnings, and saying, we know that it's going to be gone here shortly. Let's make sure that we get a little chunk of it as it's disappearing and going into this pay for state government, right? Everybody's chomping at the bit to get their little slice of the permanent fund earnings. And the way that you're going to influence that is through elections. And so you need to go out there and figure out which of your candidates are going to be focused on what the people want and the private sector wants, and which are going to be focused on growing government and what the public sector unions want. That is probably the first thing that you should do if you want to influence.
Yeah, because it doesn't seem to me anyway that it's any really longer. It's not really about party anymore. It's not really about what animal you have on your lapel of your coat. It's more about, are you more pro public economy or pro private sector economy? Are you more pro government spend versus private sector, if not spend, at least staying out of the way kind of thing? And that's really what it's become, because we've got crossover in the parties. I mean, we're talking about the Senate, where you're trying to run to get into, and they're working hand in glove with essentially people across the aisle for more big government spend, and taking conservatives who want a smaller government spend, and they're being put in the corner, with baby. And so it's really not even a party thing anymore. You've got to look at who is supporting whom and what their big policies are. You can't even trust the party labels anymore.
Yeah. If we were to wear jackets or the FR suits like race car drivers do, you've got all of your supporters
sponsors
labels on them, sponsors on your shirts. Yeah, you'd be able to tell almost instantly who is going to be supporting government growth and who is not. And that's key. I mean, I can't say it any plainer. Go find out where people are getting their money from and question them about it.
What is the solution? I mean, we talked, I just mentioned it, and it has been cited as one of the main stumbling blocks for coming together with some kind of fiscal policy plan. And that is this whole single subject rule, where, you can't put all of these together because we have a single subject rule. Well, to me, as I look at this, the single subject is a fiscal plan. I mean, that is the overall arching single subject, is a fiscal policy, long-term fiscal policy for the state. That's the blanket statement. And then everything that makes components of that seems to make sense. I mean, we've had legislators that have put capital budgets inside of operating budgets as a turducken. But again, these are two different, they may both be budget bills, but they're two separate things. I mean, how much of a stumbling block is that? And does it need to all come out piecemeal, or can we get an omnibus that has all the working components with the exception of the constitutional amendment, because that has to be separate? But I mean,
Yeah.
what does it take?
I think that you're onto something. I think that there is a possibility that we could challenge the status quo, so to speak, on what a single subject is. The problem is that we're not necessarily going, the legislature, we can say that it's a single subject, but that's also then going to get challenged in the courts. I don't disagree with you. I think that a fiscal plan that has multiple components that are related to revenue generation and taxes seems to fit into the same single subject. And why we can't do it that way doesn't make sense to me. But we do have a requirement to have constitutional amendments come via resolutions and statutory change come via bills. So you're always going to have separate vehicles with regard to that. But we proved this legislature that with HDR 7, that you can build to the floor, a resolution floor, and you can calendar it, and you can keep it there while other committees are working on other bills as part of a plan, and then bring all of the plan to the floor, each component to the floor, and it be collected there, and then dealt with each one of those individually as the calendar is scheduled. So
Right.
we've proven that that's a possibility. So where there's a will, there's a way. This last legislature, last session, we had all the components of a fiscal plan that I've been putting forward, that they were all there for us to act upon if we wanted to, but we don't have enough will to act upon them. And
Right.
that's
Because
so
HDR
start peeling
7,
the onion back is
yeah, HDR 7 was on the floor for almost 30 days. So you've proven that
Yep.
you can put it on a floor and have it calendared and have it ready to go. So you can stack them up, the 8 or 9 pieces that are required here, and then vote one right after the other on all of these. Because that was that we already heard from Cliff Grow and somebody, well, I didn't vote for that because it didn't have all the pieces. Well, of course it didn't have all the pieces. I mean, that's a good excuse. It didn't have all the pieces because you guys are fighting for the single subject rule that says it can't have all the pieces. So it's
Well,
6 of one, half dozen of the other.
spending limits that could have gone with that HDR 7 or
Yeah.
rewrites of the PFD statute. All of those were sitting in our finance committee. Finance committee were controlled by Democrats this year. House Finance. They had the majority in the House Finance. So you tell me why we couldn't get those pieces moved to the floor. Finance is the last committee referral before they come to the floor. You get
Right.
calendared in rules. So
Yep.
not my fault.
Yeah, exactly. What does it take to get from here? It's an easy excuse. Well, they didn't have the rest of it on the floor, so I couldn't vote for it, even though you could have had it. Last 90 seconds here, Ben. Folks, elevator pitch. How do folks find out more about you? Give me the full rundown here.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. So we've got a campaign website up, bencarpenterforalaska.com. You can reach me at ben@carpenterforalaska.com. We've got phone number 690-6494. Those are the ways to reach me. I'd love to chat. I'm every Wednesday I have coffee at the drawing a blank on the name of the place there in Soldotna. It's not the Ammo Can. There's another coffee place. Well, that's embarrassing. There's a coffee place in the parking lot next to Sportsman's Warehouse that we Northern Lights Espresso. That's what it's called. I've got somebody in the other room that's saving my bacon.
Northern Lights Espresso. Okay, and you have a coffee there every week, or?
So yep, every Monday morning, 9 a.m. I'm there to meet with folks and talk about whatever they want to talk about.
All right, so 9 a.m. today, Northern Lights Coffee and Espresso in Soldotna. Ben Carpenter. Every Wednesday. I'm sorry, every Wednesday. And then of course, Ben, your website again is Ben Carpenter for Alaska.
.com. Yep.
.com. All right. BenCarpenterForAlaska.com. Ben Carpenter, thanks so much for coming on board. As always, it's good to hear from you. I mean, you're fighting the yeoman's fight out there, trying to get this stuff out of committee and get it across the line. I wish you had a little more help. Let me just put it that way. I wish you had a little more help. Like you said, elections have consequences. Ben Carpenter, thank you so much for coming on board. Hold the line for just a second. Folks, we're out of time for tomorrow, for today. Tomorrow, Brad Keithley, Chris Story. I don't even know what we're going to do for Wednesday yet. Maybe we'll have Harold on. Back with more, The Michael Duke Show. All right. I don't know. Maybe we'll have Harold on Wednesday. That'll be fun. Ben, I'll give you the final bite at the apple here. Anything we didn't hit on, or topics that you want to expand on, anything else that's there, your chance is now. So,
well, thanks, Michael. I have spent enough time on here with your listeners that it should come as no surprise to people that I'm focused on growing our economic engine, and we do that by controlling and restraining government so that it doesn't consume more than it should. And one of the challenges that we have is that the legislature really doesn't care from a financial perspective. It doesn't really care what's happening in the private sector economy outside of oil and a little bit of fish taxes. So we shouldn't be surprised when our private sector is struggling and it isn't receiving support and regulation reform and care, nurturing by our legislature. It isn't incentivized. So
right.
We need to create those incentives for our elected leaders to care about private sector growth. And that means revamping the way we do things. It's growing Alaska. It's taking the next step in maturing as a state away from the reality that we can just survive on oil revenue, which we can no longer do, and move to a new structure, a new set of structures that enables the legislature to care about what's happening in the private sector economy. If we don't take that step, then we're going to continue with the structures we have, which are relying on oil revenue that's dwindling, declining, and permanent fund earnings, which is growing. Or at least it is now with regard to investments from the permanent fund. But that is maybe a slightly more, or I should say less volatile source than our oil revenue, but it still has risk. If we have too many bad investment years, we go into a depression, or I don't know what's going to happen with our national debt, and how will that affect investments, right? Could we see at some point in time our national debt causing a decline in the stock market and a decline in our overall economy nationwide? Well, if that's the case, then it's likely to affect our permanent fund earnings, which is in turn going to affect our state budget. And we've got no other source of revenue that we can turn to at that point.
Right. I mean, what about the years? Remember what was it, the early teens at one point where we had a 5 back when we were using the statutory formula. And remember when the rolling average had those 2 horrible years on it, and it went from a $1,800 dividend down to a $300 dividend because we'd lost money. So what happens if you have some kind of crash and the permanent fund doesn't earn its 5%? In fact, it loses money. And then we draw 5% or more on top of that. What is that going to, I mean, how long is that sustainable?
Well, it takes 1 year to institute an income tax. And that's why you would get one. You have too many bad years in your stock market and your permanent fund earnings decline, and you can't pay for state government. Remember, you don't have a dividend anymore. You can't pay for state government, and then you get an income tax because that's what people are going to demand.
Yeah, no, this is where we're at. This is the direction we're headed, folks. If we don't get a grip on this and figure out that elections have consequences for sure. Representative Ben Carpenter, BenCarpenterForAlaska.com. We can continue this conversation, Ben, in the future. Thank you for coming on board. I wish you the best of luck, my friend. I hope that you are victorious in this race. We need to have a shakeup in the Senate. We didn't even really get a chance to talk much about that balance in the Senate, but if you get in there and we just get a couple more changes in the Senate, we can bring a real true conservative majority back on board. Maybe you have to drag some of those people kicking and screaming, but at least we wouldn't have everything turned over to the Democrats at this point. I mean, we got a majority of Republicans in the Senate, and yet we've got a coalition majority, and the most conservative members are shut out. That kind of blows my mind.
It's hard to believe, isn't it?
Yeah. No, it's shocking to say the least. All right, Ben. Well, thank you so much for coming on board. As always, my friend, it's good to talk with you.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
Appreciate it. All right. That's Ben Carpenter here on the Michael Duke Show. Oh, I just don't even know what to say to that. It's insanity is what it is. All right. Well, we got to fly. Got more stuff going on today. It's Monday. Hoo-hoo, hoo-hoo, hoo-hoo. We will continue tomorrow. Tomorrow is Truth Tuesday. Fat Ray says he looks forward to the ensuing angst. Yeah, it's possible. That's what it's all going to be about. All right, my friends, we will see you tomorrow. Have a great day.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.